Okay, it is noon Eastern on Wednesday the 27th. Welcome to this week's Practice Power Academy webcast. And what I want to do over the next maybe about 30, 45 minutes, depending on how our Q&A goes, is really just discuss with you and share with you, kind of what's going on now. These webcasts, and I guess we'll hit the agenda a little bit here. The reason why I choose to take an hour out of my week and to offer these webcasts to all the Practice Power Academy members is, first of all, I love what I do. And I love to share, and I love to add value. And, to me, this is like one of the coolest things I get to do is to kind of broadcast, internationally. We've got advisors from 5 different countries here live, watching, listening to what we're going to do this afternoon. The other thing, quite frankly, PracticePower Academy is a great tool, but I always want to share with you, hey, what's going on now? What's working, right? What am I seeing out there in the marketplace? Last week I traveled to California, met with some of my platinum partners, and I always get valuable insights when I sit in somebody's office for a day and meet with their team and kind of really do some deep dives into things. So I want to make sure we cover those things as part of our conversation today, which we'll get into the topics in a little bit. And then also, later on today, again, in the registration process, but also if you're using the GoToWebinar app and you're online with us, if you have a question, please ask it. When I'm done with my part of our time today, the next part is really geared to answer your questions. So as a Practice Power Academy member, you have that opportunity to do that. So take advantage of my almost 25 years of doing this, right? And let me see if I can add value to what we're doing. And then lastly, obviously, this is one of the major enhancements that we've rolled out as part of Practice Power Academy versus Practice Power are having these live events, right? Having these interactions, leveraging technology. So just kind of while we're here, we also are recording the call, this whole webinar, and you will always find a replay available in the live events area or the webcast area. You'll see from the first one we've ever done, they're all there. So if you want to re-listen to something, or if you happen to miss one and you just want to see what goes on, you have that opportunity to do that. Just so you know, so if I'm looking over on one side versus the other, I've got multiple monitors, as I always say, a lot of screen real estate, and questions coming over here on my right, along with my control panel. So if you see my eyes dart over there, it's just because I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. All right, so let's talk about the 2 things I want to talk about this week. Number 1 is intentional outcomes versus just blind activity. And I found, and this was kind of an interesting part when I was sitting down with one of my platinum partners, and we were just talking about really daily game plans and discussing, standards and minimums and things like that. I get the sense that it was very important that this person hit their numbers, right? But then on further examination, it was really more about just hitting the numbers versus driving an outcome, okay? So here's the question I'll ask, and this is the question I asked him. Would you rather make 15 to 20 contacts a day and have what I call fluffy conversations, leave fluffy messages, and kind of like, kind of what I call check the box kind of things, right? Or would you rather have 8 to 10 impactful conversations where with a client you really drove some value and you added something, right? Or if you're following with a prospect, there's an intent there to do things. And I find that in this industry, we're very activity-oriented, and what we need to do is become more outcome-oriented. Because look, let me ask you a question. If you do 20 calls and leave 20 messages, I guess you check the boxes for the day, right, or 15, whatever the number is for you. But what happens if you only did 5? But in those 5, you had 3 great conversations, and were able to source 2 introductions. So 2 names, right? So 5 versus 15 or 20. When you leave your office at the end of the day, what are you going to feel more proud of? What do you feel more excited by? Just hitting the numbers or really getting an outcome, right? So the one thing I want to spend some time with today on our webcast is talking about understanding intentional outcomes and how to do it, right? Because, to do the numbers, what do you need to do? Pull up your CRM, kind of scan it over, right? Okay, and pick up the phone or punch a button. You get on the phone and you ring them and that's it. Or maybe you're going to send an email and you're like, hey, what's going on? Checking out, blah, blah, blah. No big deal there. But again, it's almost like it's unconscious activity. So let's talk a little bit about what it takes to really be intentional. So, as you can see, I'm standing up here in my office, and I've got my office raised and things like that, got my headset on. This is the way I work. This is the way I coach. This is, we're on camera here, otherwise you would see me probably looping the office here as I talk to clients, because that tends to be what I do to keep my energy levels high. So here's the checklist, if you will, for getting the best intentional outcome that you have. Number one is your energy levels, right? So if you're not feeling like getting on the phone and you get on the phone, guess what? Whether you talk to that person or whether you're leaving a voicemail to that person, you're going to sound what? Like you don't want to be there, like you're tired, like you're exhausted, like you're just trying to get through something. And that's a whole different standard than bringing it to the table. So the first thing is, how's my energy levels? So let's say, for example, hey, I'm going to do my touch-base calls. I've got 3 or 4 clients I want to reach out to, maybe 3 or 4 prospects. I know I'm probably going to leave a voicemail message 80% of the time. So we have a choice. We could either sit down, right, and kind of, well, even if you have a headset, right, but our physiology is not where it needs to be, and we can kind of just go through the motions, and trust me, if you don't believe me, do this. Leave yourself a message sitting down, and leave yourself the same message standing up after you moved around a little bit, and you tell me which message sounds better. Do your own test, right? So the first thing is my physiology, right? My energy levels. Am I ready to go? And when I used to telemarket for the Robbins organization, because that's how, there was no internet back then. What I did is we had call times, and we would get on the phone, and we'd have to source our own meetings. So we'd be cold calling and cold walking and doing all those things. And just on the calling side, one of the things that we did is we did what we call a state management check-in. Like, how is our physiology, right? And if it wasn't great, if we weren't at a level 8, 9, 10, we'd go do something about it. Now, what could all of us bright people, now maybe you're in a suit, I'm not, it's like 100 degrees here in Florida today. What can you do to really build up your energy levels? Well, number one, don't eat crap throughout the day, right? Don't sabotage your energy levels by eating garbage for lunch, for breakfast, or snack throughout the day. Keep your energy levels high, keep it hydrated, stuff like that. But number two, and like I alluded to, you want to stand up. You want to make your physiology, you want to incorporate that into your model, into what you do. Number three, if you're not where you need to be, don't get on the phone. Take a walk. We used to do crazy stuff back in the day. We would do, literally, I would do jumping jacks before I got on the phone in the office, just to get my heart rate up, to get my passion up, to get my excitement levels up, so I can go ahead. Before this webcast, I actually took 5 minutes. I'm on the second floor of my home here. I did a couple flights of stairs because the dogs kept me up all night, right? So I need to make sure that I was going to be at my absolute best for you. So I did some strategies so that I can be at my best, right? So physiology is number one. Got to make sure. There's some standards. Next, outcome. So if you're going to call a client, if you're going to call a prospect, you're going to call a center of influence, whatever, hey, I'm going to communicate with another human being. What's the goal? What's the outcome? Am I there just to see how things are, check in with them? What am I looking to accomplish, right? Now, if it's a client and it's just a touch base call, it may be as simple as, hey, what I want to do is I want to connect with this person. I want to leave them a great voicemail. I want to let them know that things are okay. I will let them know that I care about them, and I want to let them know that I'm here if they know somebody that needs help, right? How many of you sit there with a touch base call and go, that is the outcome for voicemail, versus let me call and see what's going on, right? You always want to be looking to drive a result at some level, no matter what it is. So point being is, don't just be unconscious and sit there and say, I'm just going to get on the phone right now for an hour. Be very intentional. Hey, what is the goal of this? What is the goal of this call? What is the purpose of this call? What is the goal of this email? What is the purpose of this email? Because the same languaging that we would leave on a voicemail, we would put in an email if we were following up and doing a touch base with an email, right? It could be, you can sit there and say, hey, how's everything going? How's your summer? Everything's cool here, blah, blah, blah. If you have any questions, give me a call back. Talk to you next month. You can do that, or you can take an extra 10 or 15 or 30 seconds and really ask a couple of how are things going. I know you're going to Europe. How was that? I mean, you could take a few minutes and really show somebody how you have impact with them, right? Even if it's nothing more than connecting with them. Now, those are touch bases over there. If you're doing business development, and I don't mean cold calling necessarily, I know most of you here probably don't do that, but let's say we're going to follow up on a prospect. Let's say we had somebody in our office, whether they were a referral, they came from a workshop, it doesn't matter how you got them. But we're in that scenario, in that mode, right, where they haven't said yes to us, but they haven't said no to us either. And it's time for that favorite thing all advisors like, right, which is the follow-up. What's going to give you the best opportunity? What's going to give you the best access to your resources? Sitting down, distracted, I got Bloomberg on this channel here, and I got the golf channel here because it's PGA, and you got all the distractions going on. Or you sit or stand, more appropriately, and say you lock in. When we had to do money calls, as we used to call them at Robbins, money calls, we're going to close a deal, right? You could not get on that phone, because that's all we really had back then, to close the deal if you were not at a level 10. You had to have all your resources because there was going to be objections. People are not going to want to do things. And I think that's the thing you've got to remember. When you're going to get on the phone with a prospect, this is not negative thinking, by the way. Expect objections. Expect them not to want to do something so that when they say, well, we're not sure, you're not surprised. This is not negative thinking. I want to know where I think they're going to be because I need to control the outcome. And if I get on the phone with somebody expecting, hey, it's going to be a battle. Here's what it looks like. They're going to be telling me why they don't want to make changes. They're going to tell me why they want to think about it some more. They're going to be telling me why everything it's okay now, even though they spent 2 meetings with you telling you how it wasn't, right? And we've all been through that. So they're going to tell you why they can't do something. And then you got to sit there and say, here's why we need to do it. And guess who's going to win that battle? If you're like, well, I'm kind of tired, I got to get on to the things, I knew this person wasn't going to do anything, and they give you all the rationale, they're going to push and they're going to win. And guess what? That you rob them and yourself of a great relationship. Or do you gear up and say, well, look, I understand how you feel, and let's talk a little bit more about it. Let's get down to the harder matter. You're going to deploy those resources so that you can handle those objections. And again, if you want to know how to handle objections, go to PracticePower Academy, sales training, meeting mastery. There's a whole module on just how to language and question objections very elegantly and debunk them, right? You want to be able to do that. But all the strategies are irrelevant if you don't have the right intent. So what I'm going to challenge you all to do, like starting now, is when you're going to be in communication mode, client prospect, energy levels, what's the outcome, engage your physiology. Even if you're doing a review with a client, and I got some clients who do this, this is a brilliant strategy. I've got clients that when they do reviews, they like to do reviews in the conference room with a whiteboard. And what they'll do sometimes when they're talking to the client, or hey, they're hitting a little snag, maybe the performance isn't right, or they're questioning something, is they'll sit there and say, well, you know what, you mind if I get up and go to the board? Let me show you some things, right? Now, why do they do that? Well, number one, sometimes people are more visual, right? So that kind of helps. Number two, it sometimes triggers an anchor and association of what? Teacher, student, right? That could have been there decades prior. But the third thing it does for the advisor, my client, is it gets them up and moving. They're not just sitting at the table, right? Now they're standing up, they're using their physiology. Oh, by the way, what's our client doing? Or our prospect doing? What are they doing? They're sitting down. So they're here, we're here. So we actually put ourselves in a position of authority. I don't want to use the word dominance because I don't want to make it to feel that way, but it's a position of authority. So there's a lot of ways to trigger that, and that's why I love whiteboards. Even if you have the computer and Money Guide Pro or eMoney, you've got the screen up there. Hey, don't be afraid to get up and go, hey, over here, let's look and point to the screen. Don't just sit there with the clicker and doing this. Don't be afraid to be a little bit more physical in your meetings. That will help you get some outcomes. So I just want to share that with everybody because something that came up last week in my actual physical meeting with one of my clients, to really kind of ramp up the standards, right? Ramp up the energy, ramp up the outcomes, okay? So energy, ask yourself, what's the purpose of this interaction? Call, phone, email, meeting, whatever it happens to be. What's my desired outcome? And then go for it. Same thing on money calls or prospects. What's my outcome? And expect objections. Expect them to be a little uncertain. So remember something. Like I said earlier, right? If they're uncertain and you're not solid, they win. See, I don't have to do anything right now. I could just wait. Where if you're resourceful, you'll dig in. And we'll talk about that next, which is part 2 of my time today with you, which is getting uncomfortable. So let me explain what I mean by that. So, every study, everything that I read about entrepreneurs, and trust me, I tend not to read a lot about our industry because I think it gets very myopic and you kind of get this group think going on. And I always like to be out here on the fringes and then bring it in here. When you study entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, one of the common traits they have is their ability to stay uncomfortable. And when I say uncomfortable, I mean emotionally uncomfortable, psychologically uncomfortable. How does one get uncomfortable in our space? Rejection, failure, sometimes doing things we don't want to do. I think Brian Tracy has a great comment. It's called eat the frog, right? Kind of do the nasty thing first and get it out of the way of the day. There's a lot of truth to that. The reality is that in this business, our industry, your wallet is directly proportional to your ability to stay and be uncomfortable. You want to play it safe? Nothing wrong with it. Look, here's the beauty of our industry. Playing it safe still means $250,000 to $500,000 business, right? And people spend decades playing it safe with little spurts of motivation and uncomfortableness here and there, right? But pretty much they play it safe. That comfort zone, right, which is, I call it the silent killer of careers in this industry, is the comfort zone. If you're willing to get uncomfortable and do it, so what's uncomfortable? Following up on people, risking rejection, risking failure. One of the things I did last week, which I thought was really, and look, maybe I've been a little guilty of it myself, building what I built here, is that last week, even though I was on strategic week, I said, you know what, I'm going to do one uncomfortable thing from a business development standpoint every day. And to me, that would be really only one or two things. Reaching out to somebody, either with an email or getting on the phone and calling somebody. And what I did is I didn't follow up on prospects. I went to sales directors, directors of training at firms, all these people that are in leadership roles, either connected with them on LinkedIn with a note or literally going, oh man, I've got this person in my database for 5 years. I wonder if they're still there, and calling people. And here's the fascinating part. Number one, nothing bad happened to me. Nobody arrested me. I wasn't deported. Nothing negative happened, right? In fact, the worst thing that happened was I didn't get a hold of anybody and left voicemails when I called. But here's the interesting part. I got responses. Yeah, I'd be open to talking. Yeah, I don't know what we can do right now, but hey, shoot me a note. Let's get together in August, right? Now, maybe they're blowing me off. I don't know yet. We'll find out in August, right? But here's the interesting part. Last week, I opened up 3 doors that were probably available to me for months, quarters, years, I don't know. But I was willing as a test to get uncomfortable. So now in Joe's morning ritual and daily game plan, guess what's in there? What's the one uncomfortable thing I'm going to do today? And for me, it's always going to be marketing and business development. And it's laughable now, even after less than a week, because uncomfortable is risking rejection. It's our ego getting bruised. And in my experiences, and I forgot, and look, when I cold called for Robbins and cold walked, and now this is New York City, right? This is like Lower Manhattan. Trust me, people can be very creative with rejecting you, right? They can use very interesting language, right? They can do very interesting motions. I remember I had some guy throw like a book at me once out of his office. He didn't want me there. I mean, you know, you could really be rejected in New York, and I'm sure other big cities too. And like really been told some interesting things. Or they talk about your mom, right? And all these other things. So here, nobody's going to do that. You know, the worst you're going to do is, hey, I'm not interested, or I've changed my mind, or I'm not ready yet, right? Or I've got someone, right? I mean, that's really what it boils down to. And you know, a lot of us sit there and say, well, that's like a bullet. It's like a bullet at us, and it's nothing. It's like a mosquito. It's like nothing. But we make it into this big thing, right? So I challenge all of you to understand that being uncomfortable, the level of uncomfortableness you're willing to endure, right, which is no big deal, will directly influence your success, your wallet, your checking account. And my advice to you is to just go for it. Screw it. And you know, for those who watch Steinfeld, you know the George Costanza, remember him, right? The little guy. What was the Costanza method? Whatever I think I'm going to do, I'm going to do the exact opposite because that works, right? And so sometimes you're going to sit there and say to yourself, you know, I'm busy. I don't want to make these calls right now, or I'm sure that prospect's busy, or they would have called already. You know, that's like the first thing, right? Our first thought, go the other way. I'm going to call them. I'm going to get it done, right? I don't care about failure. I got plenty of people to talk to, and just look around, right? And go for it. Get uncomfortable. So I wanted to impart that on you all today from my own personal experience as a test to really go ahead and put yourself out there. Because here's the difference, you know, if some of you, and again, I know some of you, I don't know all of you here on this call personally, but if you walk around in this business and you walk around in life and you say to yourself, how come I'm not more successful? How does so-and-so do X and I'm here, right? How did that person achieve that and I'm here? Look, unless they're incredibly lucky or they hit the lottery or, you know, whatever, chances are I can point to a couple things. Number one, they're psychologically tougher than you, right? Number two, they're willing to endure a little bit more pain emotionally by being uncomfortable to get the job done. It's really no different than an athlete. You know, here we are, the Olympics are coming up, right? Just in a few short weeks. And you know, you look at any world-class athlete, they're the best trained, they're the best conditioned, they tend to endure the most pain, right? They understand levels of uncomfortableness. So, hey, you could sit there and say, well, I got to get uncomfortable, Joe, I got to get on the phone, or, you know, you can go ride a bike for 300 miles a day and see how that feels, right? There's a lot of ways. Look at, here we are in the summer, and I've shared the story with you all, and then we'll get to our questions. You know, when I was in New Jersey, and never forget this, it was Route 78. I was going west to east, and it was August, and this is when I actually got dressed for business, right? 'Cause I used to go see clients, right? So I had my suit on, my tie, my you know decked out. Not that I could really afford those things, but my wife said you got to look the part, right? And I remember being stuck in traffic, going to be late for an appointment. I was bitching about it to myself, as we all tend to do, right? And I'm just like, I'm agitated. I'm like, what's going on with this road? Why are we so slow? And construction and stuff like that. And I ended up being stuck. And right to the right, so I'm driving. So right to my left, there's a guy, and they're laying blacktop on the road. They're repaving the roadway, and it's August. It's got almost 100 degrees probably. And this guy was not a young guy. He's probably at the time, I was probably maybe 30, probably 30, 32, something like that. So he was probably at least a decade older. And here I am in my air-conditioned car bitching, right in my suit, and the look on his face was sheer exhaustion. And we locked eyes for about 5 seconds. But it was interesting, because that 5 seconds I still remember, I can still see his face like it was today. And I remind myself of that on a regular basis to say, I do not work hard. I do not. Neither do any of you. You can tell yourself that story that, oh man, I work really hard. That's bullshit. I say that specifically. You don't. No, we all sit in our air-conditioned office. We solve people's problems. We get compensated well to solve people's problems. The worst thing we have to do is deal with rejection. We can make as much money as we want based on our own psychology and our willingness to get uncomfortable. So you can't sit there and tell me that you got it tough. You want to raise? Go raise some money. Very simple. So I challenge you to get uncomfortable and to be very intentional with your calls, with your emails, and really just raise the bar, right? I want to do that. Now, we do have some questions, so I want to get to them. So let's get to some questions. So John, which I don't know if he's here, so I'm looking to my right. I'm just seeing if he's available. I don't see him on the call, so we'll hold him. But I'm going to answer his question anyway because I'll probably get the replay. So how do you make the transition from transactional to fee? Great question. And quite frankly, with the DOL regulations coming down the track, it's a very important thing to be doing. So I'm going to spend maybe 2 to 3 minutes on this, and then I'm going to jump to the next one. So first thing is manage your own expectations. Most of my clients that go from what I call transactionally center to advisory/fee center, it's an 18 to 36 month process. Okay, it just is. You're not going to sit there and say, that's it. That's the first thing. Next thing is the line in the sand has to be drawn now, which means any new clients, any referrals, anything, fee only. That's it. We don't go back. We don't add more to the mess, right? Third, do a trailing 12 report by household of all your clients. You don't go to your top 10 clients and say, hey, we've been doing it this way for 10, 15, 20 years. Now let's do this. A, it probably is not going to go over real well. B, it's not where you want to start because you haven't perfected your process yet. So if you have a book of 300, keep math simple, we start the first tranche, our clients 250 to 300. And I know some of you are sitting there saying, yeah, but they're small and they may not even meet the minimum and stuff like that. But here's the other thing is they probably have zeros at the end of their trailing 12 household report, right? So in other words, no downside for failure, none. And it gives you an opportunity to practice your craft. So you start there and then you do a ramp up, all right? Next, I use the 3 strikes and you're out scenario, which is I'm going to bring it up, I'm going to recommend it, I'm going to recommend it strongly. You say, no, I like it the way it is, I don't want to make any changes, I'm not going to sit there and say you're fired. I'm probably going to come back to you maybe 6 months, the next review, whenever it happens to be, right? And I'm going to invite you again to come into my new factory, into my new world. And either you will or you won't. But again, I'm going to give you the opportunity, and then I'm going to do it a 3rd time. So that could right there could take 18 months just in that cycle, right? And then at the end of that, you should have transitioned enough of them where now you can make a decision on this relationship. Do I just say, okay, I'll leave them in terms of being, transactional, or I'm going to pivot them to a colleague or pivot them to the call center or pivot them. And when you're ready to do that, sometimes then and only then, when their back's against the wall, will they acquiesce, and still some will never acquiesce, okay? So that's the next thing you want to do is again, 3 strikes. That way, there's never a meeting that's been, I got to get this right. The last thing I would say, never make it about the fee. Don't sit there and say, well, hey, based on the last 12 months, you've paid X amount of dollars in commission, and if we go to this fee arrangement, you'll save X. That is the most dangerous conversation to ever have. You want to make it about proactivity, advice, guidance, planning, enhancement, right? All the goody things, the new factory, right? Don't make it a math proposition and a purely an economic proposition. You'll lose, okay? So hopefully that helps you, John. Chris writes, I'm overwhelmed with client reviews and prep. What can I do? Let me see if he's here. Of course, it's the summer, so you never know, right? I don't see him either. So with Chris, first thing I would say is, number one, if you're overwhelmed, are you over-reviewing clients? I find a lot of people in this industry still are stuck in the old math of doing quarterly reviews for everybody, right? And I think for most clients, that's way too much. It's incongruent, right? Because what do we tell our clients? Hey, we're going to take a long-term approach, right, and invest in our allocation. So why are you giving them 90-day snapshots? I'll tell you why. Because you're using it as a fee justification vehicle. They're paying me, so I got to do these reviews. Our recommendation is 2 reviews a year for your top clients, one review for everybody else. And that will open up your slotting. That's number one. Number two is understand your flow, which is basically how many reviews do you want to do in a given week. Is it 5? Is it 8? Is it 10? Is it 15? And I say comfortably. So what's your slotting, right? Very important. Next, standards. So one of the standards that I love, which I think is critical, is to really make sure that if I've got a client coming in on Wednesday today, that no later than Tuesday, yesterday, 24 hours, that review, that prep for that review, the handouts, the file, whatever I need, whatever I'm doing, it's locked in. Please don't have your assistant coming to you when the client's sitting in the lobby with, oh, here's the stuff. What are you going to do with it? If you see something that's wrong, you're screwed. So minimum 24 hours, ideally 48 hours, right? Be ready. And then the last thing I would say is that, and I've seen this a lot, is that there's this concept in our head, at least some of you, that says this: I need to know everything about everything about everything so that if a client in a review asks me a question, I'm like the freaking Encyclopedia Britannica or whatever, and I can go ahead and just pull the information out of my head. It's like you're studying for like a final. And you'll spend 2 or 3 hours getting all the answers to the questions that will never be asked, right? So the one thing you can do is be very clear and say, hey, you know what? That's a great question. Let me do some research for you. I'll get back to you within 24 hours. Is that okay? And once you can get comfortable, and by the way, none of your clients will ever sit there and say, I can't believe you don't know the answer to this question. They just won't do that. But it will give you, it will open up your whole concept to not have to over prep, because I find a lot of advisors who are overwhelmed with reviews and prep, and you wrote prep here, is because they're over prepping, right? And usually it's because they want to have answers to all the questions, and you just can't. Just keep clear on that. And then the last one, Brian, which I'm going to peek, see if he happens to be around. And by the way, if any of you have any questions, now's the time to put them in, because it's the last question for our time today. So if you want to throw something in into the box there, please feel free to do so. Brian asks, I'm doing okay. I just can't seem to get motivated. I come to the office and get a little done. So again, whether that's something in the summer that's just going on with him, here's what I would say: morning ritual, daily game plan, business plan. And in business plan module 1, right? Are we associated to what we need to get done? Are we intentional, right? From that perspective. And the worst thing you can ever do in this industry, as far as I'm concerned, is go into the office and tell yourself, I'm just going to go in. Just in case somebody needs something on the phone, I'm just going to come in. And you kind of get into this concept that you're actually growing your business because you're sitting in your chair. That is not accurate. It is a lie. It's a falsehood. I would much rather you be out of the office. So I think the one thing you got to ask yourself is, what am I doing during the day, right? Do I have goals? Do I know what I want to accomplish? Now somebody like Brian, again, I don't know who he is, but I'm going to take a shot and say, he's probably in that comfort zone, right? I make enough money. My bills are paid. I know I can do better. I'd like to versus commit to, right? I'd like to do better. But things are okay, and they sleepwalk through it. Then they sleepwalk through their career, and they'll sit back and say, "Hey, what could have been?" Right? So, so Brian, if you're going to watch the replay on this, what are your compelling reasons? Right? Because if you don't have compelling reasons, guess what? It ain't going to happen, my friend. Number 2. You got to understand what the rules of the game are every day, and that means you got to create the rules, right? Make contacts, play the game. Next, when you're done playing, leave. There's no reason to hang in an office Clients, if they need you, trust me, they'll find you. There's email, there's cell phone. Unfortunately, there's text, right? You're not a help desk. You're not there to. This is not Schwab. When they call and expect you there. It's not what we do. So again, don't be afraid to get out. You probably do 2 hours worth of work, and you take it and you stretch it into 8 or 9, right? Bad, man. That's just really expensive in the business, so let's not do that, okay? Last thing, real quick, again, I always want to provide value, is since we've launched Practice Power last week, we're running some specials. There they are. If you're not an Elite Access member, take me up on my offers. Once they're gone, and we go back to normal pricing, okay? So keep that in mind. Just want to let you all know that. I don't say I have any questions right now, so I'm going to wrap this up. We're about 35, 36 minutes or so. It's summer. I want everybody to get back, knock it out, get out of here, right? We will be back here the next 3 Wednesdays. So first, second, third week of August, we're going to roll with these. And then the last 2 weeks, I'll be on break. I'll be actually out in Seattle hosting an event. So next 3 weeks we're on, so watch for the emails, right? Any replays you'll find in Practice Power Academy. Look for that. And I thank you all for taking time out of your busy day to be here. Hope you found some value. And I'll see you all in about 7 days. And with that, I am out.